Hello, everyone.
Wow. Oh my goodness gracious.
Welcome, welcome.
Hello,
Hey,
Hi, Ann. Hi, Bart.
can you hear me?
Yep.
Good. Hi,
Ruth,
Ann.
some
Aaron,
of your
hi,
friends.
Christine. Hi, Shannon.
Harper. Hey, how are you?
Hey, Beth. Hey, Ellie.
Hi,
What an exciting night.
I
Big
know, it's
deal.
great.
Yeah.
Hi, Becca.
Hi, I just figured out my audio. Hi.
Awesome.
Hi, Beth.
Louise, this is great.
So,
Joanne, Randy, this is a very big deal. Oh, my cousin Anne, too.
hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
This is really fun just seeing you all pop up in little boxes.
Like Hollywood Squares, only a lot more
Exactly.
people.
Reminds me of a poem in your book.
Thank you all for being here. I am Lindsay Garcia. I'm going to keep us on gallery mode for a minute. I'm Lindsay Garcia. I am the Meadowlark Press poetry editor and publicist. Meadowlark Press is the proud publisher of Ruth's first full-length poetry collection, Witness. This is the 10th year of Meadowlark Press and the 6th year of the Birdy Poetry Prize. And for those of you who don't know, Ruth's collection is the finalist for the Birdy Poetry Prize this year. And Becca Myers over here is our winner. So we are kind of celebrating them hand in hand, like back in March when we first announced this. So this is really, really exciting. Ruth's book is available to order right now, and I'm going to put the link to order it in the chat. So please do yourself a favor and go order yourself a copy because one, you're going to love it, and two, it supports Ruth, and three, it supports Meadowlark Press. Meadowlark Press also has a Facebook and Instagram page, so I'm going to include those in the chat as well. For those of you who are social media savvy. We will have a bunch of updates on there. And of course, always on our website, we have a little blog. Okay, I am now going to introduce the woman of the hour. Ruth Bardon grew up in Highland Park, New Jersey, and lived in a number of Midwestern cities before firmly settling in Durham, North Carolina. She received an MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop in 1982 and a PhD in English from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 1995. Her poems have appeared in the Southern Review, Boulevard, the Cincinnati Review, New Ohio Review, Salamander, and other journals. She is the author of two chapbooks, Demon Barber, published by Main Street Rag in 2020, and What You Wish For, published by Finishing Line Press in 2023. She is also the author of Selected Short Stories of William Dean Howells, published by Ohio University Press 1997. And now she is the author of her first full-length collection, Witness, by Meadowlark Press, 2024. Please join me in welcoming Ruth Bardon.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you for the introduction. And I did write things down because so I have to write things down. Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you everybody for being here tonight. I'm really, really grateful. It means a lot. Thank you. So I have to start by praising Meadowlark Press, specifically the publisher, Tracy Millian Simmons, and Lindsay, the poetry editor. I have not got a lot of experience in working with publishers, but I can't imagine how anyone could have a better experience than the experience I had with Meadowlark. Um, for any of you who are interested in being published, you have to submit to Meadowlark. They publish all sorts of books, not just poetry. So please think of them and tell any of your friends who are writers to think about them because it's just been a complete pleasure from beginning to end. And I do know that that is not always or often the case. So I'm going to read 14 poems from my new book. They're short. And I'll talk about them while I'm reading because I always think that makes things more interesting. And I've already read around half of these in other book launches, so some of you will be hearing these for the second time. But I think that's okay because I always like to hear things twice. I like to read books twice and watch movies twice. So I'm hoping that that won't be a problem. And then when I finish reading the poems from Witness, I'm going to read three brand new, well, not brand new, but three new poems. And then I'm going to ask two of my friends to read. Each of them will read a poem, and then there'll be a Q&A. And I welcome questions about the book, and I welcome questions about individual poems. So if you find yourself with questions as I'm reading, please make a note for yourself or write it down somewhere because I'd be very happy to talk about individual poems. So this book, as you know, is divided into three chronological sections: early years, middle years, later years. And many of the poems, though not all the poems, are semi-autobiographical, though I lied a lot in this book and changed things in order to make what I hoped would be a better poem. So I'm going to read the poems in the order in which they appear in the book. And I'll start with one of the early ones. And can everyone hear me? Am I loud enough and not too fast or slow or annoying or no? Okay. So I'm going to start with one of the poems that got mentioned in the blurbs, two of the blurbs, I think, in the back, and it's called Swimming Pool. So this is Swimming Pool. Underwater, in the sky blue room of its walls, the chalk white of its floor, we couldn't stop swimming through the beams of light. Pink, tangerine, yellow, streaming like sunshine from smooth glass spheres. Believing we could feel the difference in the colors, believing they'd become a part of us. We'd carry that miracle after we emerged, an amulet of ice staying hard in the sun. When I see the shadow of glass, of steam, or the sun shines off the red vase in the window, I think of how strong I was, slicing through a world where I couldn't even breathe and claiming it as mine. And I meant to introduce that poem by talking about how it came about, but I'm a little flustered. So the way that poem came about was when I was growing up, my family spent a few summers in Los Angeles. And we stayed in a garden apartment that was built around a swimming pool. And that pool had colored lights on the side. And I thought that was just the greatest thing ever. And I always remembered it. So that's where that came from. So the next poem that I'd like to read is also from my early childhood. And it's also one that I've read before. And it's about waiting in the lobby of our neighborhood post office and looking at the FBI wanted posters. For those of you who know Highland Park, this is on Raritan Ave, on the south side of Raritan Avenue between 3rd and 4th, I think. So this poem is called Wanted. So much appealed in the pictures that hung in the post office lobby. The grid of it, black and white rectangles, perfectly stacked, up and down, side to side, each tagged with a name, the strange abbreviations, the bold-faced letters, the lattice between them like an antique window, the names of cities, the names of crimes, the incomprehensible vocabulary, but best of all, the faces, slicing through the world that I knew, an opening like the bathroom window my neighbor had climbed through when we locked ourselves out, her cheerleader legs scissoring and waving. I hadn't known I could enter that way, hadn't known all the ways I could leave. The next poem is one that I read at my first book launch because it was included in my first chapbook. And it's in part about the family rituals and habits from your childhood that you just think of as kind of normal and you don't question. And then later on, you kind of reconsider them. So this poem is called Apple. I told it as a funny story, how every day my father went to work with an apple in his lunch, and how he brought it home every evening, and how my mother put it in his lunch the next day, one apple traveling back and forth 5 times each week, every Friday, the carrying apple being discarded, every Monday, a new one taking its place. Now I think of its redness, its roundness, and what was packed into it. Now I think of the choice every day to bring it back. Years after he died, she had his ashes moved to the Jewish cemetery, breaking all sorts of rules because she'd returned to her religion. He'd have hated this, but I imagine that he'd have stayed silent, carrying his love and resignation back and forth between worlds, unable to deny her this hope and unwilling, after all, to spare her from it. And now I'd like to read a poem from this first section of the book that's not about early childhood, but that's from my early teen years. And this is actually one of the 2 poems that was not in this book when it was accepted. The other was near the end, and they let me add both of them to the manuscript after it was published, after it was accepted. And I'm really grateful for that, because I know a lot of publishers won't let you do that. They'll just say, oh, this is what you gave me, and so this is what we're going to publish. So I was really pleased because I wanted those 2 poems to be in the book. So this is one of those poems, and it's called Poolside Cigarette. The last time my father smoked a cigarette was a year or 2 after he'd quit. We'd come down that morning on the turnpike, fighting traffic to be on time. And now we were standing by the backyard pool, the adults holding drinks in the afternoon sun. I wanted to go inside the house, but I knew I had to stay outside, where most of the guests were crying, which made me think of how dizzy I'd felt earlier that day at the mausoleum, when her 2 teenage daughters had buckled and collapsed as if some force had flung them together and dragged them down to the floor. The cigarette's what I remember most. How I started up with my preteen lecture all about the evils of smoking, and how someone had firmly shut me up. I was suddenly soaked through with shame, as if I'd dropped into the pool, had simply walked over the edge, unable to see it was there. And the last poem I'll read from this section is ostensibly about my 2019 Subaru Forester, which has facial recognition and all these fancy safety features. But what I was thinking about in the poem is how, in order to grow up, you have to consciously separate yourself from your family, or at least this was my experience. So some of the poems at the end of this section are about that kind of rejection of family. And this poem is called Behind the Wheel. Behind the Wheel. She greets me by name on her multimodal screen the moment I sit down behind the wheel. And she always remembers how I like to be held, softening and shifting before I start the engine. She warns me of dangers when I'm distracted, gently at first, then more urgently, and if she needs to, she'll pull me from my path or take control and stop me cold. All she wants is to keep me alive, her only job, and one that I hinder each time I climb in, each time I take off, adding to her miles, her wear and tear, impatient to arrive, to step away and leave her on the side of the road. I have to say, it's very strange reading all this and with no noise or anything in the background. It's a weird experience. I saw that. Thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to read a few poems from the middle section. And that section is kind of a grab bag, but it's mostly about the kind of tumult of early adulthood and middle age and the difficult process of going through changes and figuring out who you are. So I also include some pandemic poems in that section, even though I was well past middle age when the pandemic started, because I think that for a lot of us, the pandemic was also a time of trying to figure out who we were and how to manage. So there are a lot of poems in this section about feeling unsettled and confused. And I'll start with one of them, which is called My Name. And it's the first poem in the middle section. My name. My name is a coat that doesn't suit the weather. My name is a job I'm not qualified for. It's something in my mouth that I have to spit out. It's someone else's car in the parking lot. If I change my name, it will follow me, like a dog that I looked at when I shouldn't have. When I hear my name, I wonder what person that is, if it is a person, not a strange sort of cough. My name is a stranger whose hand I won't shake. Fingers and thumbs stretched in rows like a fence to keep things out, to keep things in. The next poem is called Menu. And anyone who knows me knows that I love to eat, to go out to eat. Durham is a fantastic town for restaurants, and my husband and I go out to eat 2 or 3 times every week. So I've had a lot of experience in dining out and in looking at menus. So this is a kind of a dark poem about a menu. It's called Menu. It begs you to look, the curvy font on the deckled yellow page, and the offerings of 5 or 6 choices, easily managed, and the libations hidden on the back, so that you can consider one thing at a time. All this thoughtfulness, when what it wants is to have you open your mouth in a room full of strangers, look directly into someone's eyes while you place new things between your lips, chew them, swallow them, love them, pay for them. And the next poem is one that was also in my first chapbook, and it's the title poem. And I picked this poem for the title because I wanted the title to be the name of one of the poems. And I thought this poem had that whole kind of process of innocence to experience in it. So the poem is Witness, and it's in the middle section. Okay, Witness. I ran into Nick on the library steps after class years ago, and when he asked where I'd been, I explained about the miscarriage. What I remember is the look he gave me when I said that nothing that bad had ever happened to me. He looked at me, but I knew he was seeing something else, someone else, and I was ashamed. Today, taking a walk, I thought of him, almost wanting him to know how things turned out. But I know it's better to leave him a witness to something that pure, to someone who lived for a while, not knowing that the first death is always the first of many, a beginning, not an end. And the last poem from the middle section that I'm going to read is a little bit longer than the others. And I'm really glad my cousin is here today because she's in the poem. So this, it also mentions my daughter who's here, and it may even mention the mother of the friend who, anyhow, I'm not sure. So this poem is called Music Lessons. Oh, and I had a little intro. I wanted to say that I think this poem is kind of about changing and losing things, but it's also about holding on to things. So, music lessons. College applications. My daughter's friend, asked to write about something you've lost, writes about his soprano voice, which startles me. It seems so physical. Everyone who hears this story stops, considering how they'd answer. Each of them seeing an array of faces getting older in a mirror. What I think of is my flute, not lost, but sitting in its thin case in my closet, of carrying it with me into airports, of holding it under my feet until we landed, and of my uncle booking a seat for his bass every time the orchestra traveled, how my cousins called it their sibling, how they worried over finding it a home after he died, even in their grief. I think of how I practiced every day, By now, I'm sure the pads are torn or swollen. Maybe 20 years ago, I took it out to see if I could play and couldn't, remembering the fingering, but not the way to curve my hands enough to cover up the keys with open holes. It felt unnatural to hold my mouth pursed like that, to hold my arms that high. Even that way of breathing has been erased, has floated off like smoke or steam or air or music dying at a vaulted ceiling. Still, sometimes, when I hear that liquid sound, it's like a memory of swimming naked or knowing someone's body like my own, someone who once sat and flew with me, like my uncle's bass, memorialized by my cousin's small tattoo, something written on the skin. And now I'd like to turn to the last section, which is poems about aging, but also about the rewards of aging, one of which is knowing yourself a lot better. So the first one is one of the poems I've written about modern technology. So when I was thinking about reading this, I looked back and I have written poems about Uber, Zoom, filling out forms on a computer, share bikes, Airbnbs, virtual reality, obviously Subaru Foresters. And here's one more, and this was in my first chapbook, and this poem is called Alexa, who did not answer. Alexa. She is ignorant and admits to being easily confused. She tells her jokes with a cheerfulness that shows how lost she is. I want to help her and teach her how the world works. And I love this feeling of knowing so much more. But it also makes me hate her a little more each time. Each time she admits she's having trouble, is helpless to assist. Like a mother of grown children who see her now as someone who offers only facts from the news, a weather report, or a small repertoire of songs and stories. Like the mother I may become, sitting and nodding as if I understood the talk, chiming in and coming to attention when my name is spoken. The next poem was also in my first chapbook, and it's called How It Starts, another poem about motherhood. How it starts. It starts when you enter a room and your children are talking about you, calling you she, not mom. For once you hear them speaking in their native tongue. All this time they've been translating. They hum melodies you've never heard and mouth the lyrics, and their hands form complicated patterns in the air. It ends with them whispering in a hallway, slowly circling and then landing. They come in and touch your arm as if you are a bubble or a baby or a flower. Then they fly, their small shadows flitting from wall to wall to wall. The next poem might require some explanation. It's called Resting Bitch Face. And I think it's pretty obvious that I don't have a resting bitch face. And that's because I'm of a generation where women were just automatically expected to be sweet and a bit deferential. So this poem is about how hard it would be for me to shake that. This poem is called Resting Bitch Face. The newspaper article says that an RBF bar has opened. No tipping or smiling required. If I were to go, I would have to be reborn with yellow wings and claws, pomegranate teeth, hair made completely of scallions and diamonds. I'd have to be miles high. I'd have to be glass and lava. I'd have to ooze through the walls, rearranging everyone's atoms. And even then, I might fail to do more than the not tipping. The next poem is also one I've read before. It's called Jigsaw. Jigsaw. Your mother tells me how her own mother always talked when she did jigsaw puzzles, pushing the pieces in and muttering, "I'll make you fit," under her breath. I never met her, but she feels like a friend. I get just as mad when things don't work. It makes me smile to think of her jabbing stubbornly at the cardboard, willing the knobs to be smaller or different, thinking that if the color's right, the shape can't be wrong. But even if she made it work, she'd be left with a picture full of ridges and rips, an oar in the sky, a seagull's wing stabbing its way into the sand. And the last poem from the book that I'll read came about because I drive in my neighborhood to my aerobics class 3 mornings a week. And there are some aerobics people here, which I'm happy about. And I always see the same people walking their dogs. And I thought a lot about them. So this is a poem about the experience of loving a dog or a person as they age. And it's called The Dog Walkers. Like stars, they wheel in circles. They rise and set with the sun. Like birds, they congregate and fly their separate ways. They see me and they don't. I'm only a head and a wave. But I can see them clearly, how they work to adjust their pace, how they wait without resentment and look down patiently, how they offer quiet words as if in conversation, meeting the demands of bodies young and old, tired or frenzied, sick or not yet sick, not yet needing to be cared for, needing relief and food, and water set out, pause, carefully, gingerly washed. Thank you. And now if we have enough time, I'd like to read 3 new poems. After this book was accepted, I mean, I was completely delighted, but I also kind of wondered if I would ever write anything again, because everything I had that I thought was any good, I put in this book. And there I wasn't sending anything out because it was all out there. So that was a little scary. And what I eventually came up with was a group of 11 related poems that were all based on GPS, which is really weird. And I can talk about how I think that came to be if you'd like, but the poems aren't really about GPS. They just kind of use GPS as a starting point. And I haven't shared them with anyone. So here are 3 of the GPS, and my husband's heard me saying, "Oh, those damn GPS poems." So here are 3. Well, I've shared them with my friend Kelly, but no one else. So here are 3 of the GPS poems. So the first one is called Search. If I follow the route that's been shaded in blue, it will take me to a town with a name like yours. Perhaps you'll still be there, a child, still sweet, the hardness of your eyes only lightly sketched in and easily erased. Just a trail through the grass where a small bike with ribbons has recently raced. Just a few dandelions, flattened as you ride, that could spring back tonight and wait for the sun. I think you'll be there, and you'll spin on your toe like a dancer and land, and then leap, and then run, agile as a cat, all instinct and balance, all its lives intact. And the second of the 3 poems is called Street View. The GPS directs us to this 2-lane road far from the city, miles from the highway. We don't belong here. It belongs to the locals, and even some of them missed the turn in the dark the first time they came, arrived too late, long after the song, the thin voices joining above the cake, arrived to find a few people leaving, crumbs on the table. But now they know it, the rise, the curve, the stolid barn, the muted sign. They know how the sun fits between those 2 trees, how later it spreads over 3 small ponds. And now we're told to drive 3 miles more to rejoin the pike, back on our route. The sun, low behind us, paints everything gray, and all we can see is a blur of trees. no barn, no pond, as if somehow the gifts are waiting unopened for someone else. And then the last poem I'm going to read is called Proceed to the Root. When the folding chairs have been put away and neatly stacked outside, the guests have gone, the baby shower, the funeral, wedding concluded. You proceed to the root, which means putting one foot in front of the other, as you always do, your body compelled to do the same thing, no matter how baffling the terrain. And that's what I've got. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. That was amazing. Would you
Yeah,
like to
can we
introduce
go
your
off
friends now?
mute and just applaud? I just want
Yes,
to give
that's
her
a
some
great idea.
audio feedback because it was so beautiful.
Oh my gosh, I've got 46 comments in the chat. I would, you're going to have to somehow save this chat so I can see it because I don't have time to look at it now. Oh my goodness. Well, before we go on, maybe I should introduce my friends and let them read. Is that the way we're going to?
I think that sounds perfect.
Okay.
Next time, hit the record button.
Yes, then we'll make sure to congratulate Ruth and ask some questions. But we'll have Ruth's friends read a little bit here next. But let me assure you that the chat is alive and applauding you, and it's been wonderful. Everybody interacting with you.
Well, thank you. Because, it's such a strange experience because, you just, it's just
It
like
is.
silence out there. So, is there anyone there? Okay. Well, let me go ahead and introduce my friends one at a time, if that's okay.
Perfect.
So, I asked two friends to read, and I want to start with my friend Ellie. And I've been friends with Ellie basically forever. But I think that she didn't start to write poetry until fairly recently. And so because of that, it's very impressive that she's been able to get published in quite a few places. So Ellie, take the floor.
Well, thanks, Ruth. First, I want to say, oh my gosh, you were amazing. Your poems are incredible. I loved hearing some of the old favorites because I definitely have some, and I can't wait to reread your book now for like the fourth or fifth time because it never gets old. So, okay, I'm just going to read a poem. It's called Garden. I could see our parents' old world and my brother's black and gray beard overtaking his face, a bit tuckered. As kids, we would pack for pretend trips, mostly to Florida, steering the parked pasture green car sitting out front. Bring Wise chips, Tam Tams, and Entenmann's cookies from the pantry in the basement, where he did chemistry experiments like the All-American boy on the 50s cardboard box, blowing up things in a home with no room for more fire. The last time we talked, he said he had launched into gardening. I could imagine his sweat, hands without gloves working the dirt, Swiss chard okra and rainbow tomatoes, summer squash, golden beets, purple pole beans. The garden sneezing color and light, blinds yanked all the way up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Ellie, I love the line about the house where there's no room for more fire. Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you very much. I love
Thank
that.
you for asking me. I'm so honored to have been asked by Ruth to do this.
And now I'm going to introduce my friend Kelly. And I met Kelly because we were at the Iowa Writers Workshop together, and she and I have had a wonderful writing collaboration for many years. And she is largely responsible for any success I've had, maybe completely responsible. So she is the author of two chapbooks and one full-length book, and she's been reviewed in the North American Review and the Ohio Review. And she was mentioned in a review by someone on the board of the National Book Critics Circle. And you can read about her on her website. Just Google Kelly Rowe poet. So I can't praise her enough. So take it away.
Ruth, you crack me up.
But I have to say, it's really nice of you to ask me to read a poem, but my pleasure tonight was in hearing these poems that I've lived with you read aloud in your voice. They're even better than on the page.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I have no responsibility for any success.
Oh, we can talk about that later.
But because you're nice enough to ask me to horn in on your reading, I will read a poem. Um, it is a poem I wrote for my daughter, one of the first years after she left home and wasn't home for Christmas. It's called You Called on Christmas Day. And I thought of the Virgin who, when her time came, was so far from home. No mother, no sister, only her husband blocking his ears in a corner of the shed. After hours in the dark, she was done. And through the open doorway of her exhaustion, saw a black sky exploding with stars. One fixed very high was enormous, golden. It held her gaze, and at last she understood how the unbearable can draw us close to a radiance that some call God. Her soul rose shimmering to meet it, as now, when the afternoon sky fills with evening light, I pray to draw close to your distant, disembodied voice and remember how once my body dissolved the wall between us, how I first met your gaze. I, who had always been adrift in the expanding universe, saw the dark fill with a pure light, and I reached out and named you, beloved, you who were already moving away like stars, like grace, never meant to be held long or fast. Thank you, Ruth.
That was beautiful. How wonderful to hear from your friends and how wonderful to have everybody here celebrating you. How are you feeling now, Ruth?
A little relieved.
Good, good. We've got some happy tears in the chat. We've got a lot of gratitude. Ah, this is just beautiful. It's wonderful.
And I have to say, I have friends here. I have family here. I have local friends here. I have high school friends here. Some of whom I haven't seen in a long time. I mean, this is just a really kind of wonderful reunion. I have aerobics friends here. I have neighborhood. So, it's book group. So it's really just kind of I felt like I'm having a big party.
As it should
That'll teach you.
feel.
I hope you've learned your lesson now, Ruth.
It would be so nice if everybody could physically be together, but we'll take this as the alternative, right?
It's a lot cheaper.
It's a lot cheaper. Yeah, I'm grateful for this. All right, I'm going to get us back to gallery mode. And now we will open the floor for a Q&A. I will leave this up to you all, but of course I have some questions too, even though I've been working with Ruth very closely for the last handful of months, since March really,
Yeah.
to get this book into the world. So please either just go ahead and unmute yourself, and you might have to fight somebody else to become the speaker, or I'll check the chat out if we have a little bit of a lull, or use that raise your hand feature. So go ahead, have at it, ask Ruth whatever you would like.
I already threw a question in the chat, but I can reiterate.
Sure, Zach, go for it.
Yeah, I was just curious, Ruth, what drew you to that title for the collection?
Oh, well, as I said, I wanted to name the book after one of the poems. And I thought that poem really was representative of, the change from kind of the innocence to feeling sorrow and knowing that sorrow was part of life. So it was really, and I thought it made a title, but mostly just because I
It
did want
does. It
to name it.
does.
I did want to name it after one of the poems, and I was trying to find something that I thought kind of could stand as a little microcosm of what was going on in the book.
You know, the one word titles are tricky, but I think it's works well. Good
That's
choice.
right. That's right.
On that same note, could you talk about the cover image?
Oh, I'd love to talk about the cover image. So my sister is here. She's waving her hand. So I think what happened, our birthdays, her birthday's in July, my birthday's in August. And I think that when I was 8 and she was 13, which would have been, let's see, it was 1966. Did I do the math right? Um, yeah, 1966. I think we both must have gotten cameras for our birthdays. And I have a very strong memory of us standing in the driveway of our house on North Fifth Avenue in Highland Park and taking a picture of each other at the same moment. And Jen, I don't know what you did with the picture of me, but I kept the picture of her and I put it in an album and I wrote underneath it, picture, with the wit of an 8-year-old. But the amazing thing is that I kept that album and I remembered that picture. So when I was trying to come up with a cover, I had other ideas, but I remembered that picture, and I just think I think it's a great picture. So, and then when I showed Jan this, the first thing she said was, "I remember that dress," which I thought was pretty funny. So yeah, I was thrilled that it was able to be, that it worked for a cover. So I think it's kind of arresting. I think you notice it. So.
Oh, definitely. For those of you who haven't seen the cover yet, though, I'm sure you all have, you can scroll to the beginning of the chat and click that link and see the cover image. And the title poem works so wonderfully with it.
Thank you. I just got a note on the in the chat that a friend of mine I haven't seen in like a million years is here, so I'm trying to find her on but I can't seem to. Oh well, Kathy, if you're there, can you like wave a hand or something? Oh well, sorry, I got distracted, Lindsay. I'm sorry.
No, this is great. This isn't just a time for questions, but a time for praise as well. So if any of you just want to say some words of congratulations, now is the time.
I think another comment about the title, I think you did well because Witness is one of the very strongest poems in the collection. It's one of my really favorite poems that you've written. In fact, it made me feel like crying when you read it. And I'm not a big crier. And so I think it's a good way to choose a title because then it leads a reader immediately to that poem, or it usually does me if
Yeah, and
there's
I also liked the photograph because I am both the witness and the witnessed. I'm both the object of. So it's about me witnessing it's about my impression of myself because myself at a younger age or at different ages, and also my impression of the world. So I liked that it worked in two directions.
I'd like to say something. Um,
This is my cousin.
yeah, hi, Jan. I see you too. Um, I've read all the poems. She sends me all of her books that she's published in the last few years. And for me, it brings back a lot of memories and just feelings of what we all experienced as children together as a family. So it brings me tears, it brings me laughter, and it makes me feel connected.
Thank you.
That's beautiful.
Hi,
Um,
Ruth.
I hear Christine. There she is.
Hi. I have a question for you. I'm so excited that you're doing this collection of GPS poems. How wonderful. And I liked the ones that you read very much.
Thank you.
And in the first poem, and I can't remember the name of it,
I searched.
you search, you're right. So and I think that I would have never thought that GPS could be such a great focus in terms of a really universal theme, right? Of searching and place and setting. But you make a reference to a town with a name like yours. And I know how much you like puzzles. But it's like a puzzle for the person listening. And I kind of almost stopped listening to the poem because I got distracted thinking of, okay, towns with names like, okay, is it a man or is it a woman? I started trying to think about towns and names. It was so specific, and it also almost seemed like something you were giving the audience to play with, as figure it out. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you what the name is. You figure it out. So anyway, or not. It's like almost like maybe even a secret thing to yourself. Or it so what
Or,
what what were you trying to do with that?
well, I mean, I probably shouldn't, answer
You want
this
us to,
question,
do you want us
but
to keep
I'm going
feeling
to,
the
but it's going to
mystery?
be a very disappointing answer,
Okay.
which is just that I lied. I mean, I
Of
didn't, there was
course.
not a town with a name. I just wanted a way. I don't know what, I guess I was thinking about this one person, and I guess I can go ahead and say, it was just someone who was in my family who had a terrible life and died, kind of young and, was just very, very troubled. And who I knew when she was this cute little girl, and I'd been thinking about her because she died recently. And I guess I'm not quite sure how I came up with the town. I don't know. It just kind of came to me, but I didn't know what I was going to be writing about, when I started that. It was like, I think it was the first one that I wrote. I think. So I was
Well,
just thinking of her being somewhere, and
uh,
wanting to go someplace where I could see her.
I
You
think it's your cousin who mentions in the chat, it's like a horse with no name, which
Oh,
is a
that's
good point.
interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It just kind of got me into it. I needed a way to kind of get into this combine searching for someone and then this one person. So
Well, there I go, reading too literally.
no, 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 no. But because I mean, because obviously there's lots of towns with people's names. So, there's lots of, I don't know, Maryville and Frederick and, there's all kinds of, yeah. So
I
it, but
was starting to go through the list.
no, it was just a way to get me into it. And, as I said right out at the outset that I lie a lot, so
Um,
not in real life, just in poetry life.
Alicia Becca Myers has a question related to that. She says, I was wondering about what you said earlier about making some changes to autobiographical moments for the sake of the poems. Could you talk about a particular choice?
And
Oh,
I wanted to say that I was thinking about this because I have a poem. So a lot of my book involves my mother, who's 85, and I've shown some poems to her. And one of them, I talk about how she almost sat on a water moccasin when she was young, but it was actually her sister, and it drove my mom crazy because it wasn't accurate. And I didn't take it out of the book, but I guess my question's kind of twofold. One, I'd like to hear about your process for lying for the sake of art, which I think we all do. And also, have there been these moments of altered reality that family members or friends have caught and they have said to you, well, it didn't happen that way? I'm just very curious about that.
but this just happened. This actually just happened because my sister-in-law, who's here, also Karen, you can wave, when she read one of the poems, said to me, she said, "Did you just remember it wrong?" And I said, "No,
That's
I had
insane.
to take this person out of it because it was just getting too complicated. If you had to explain all the family relationships and the step siblings I mean, it was just too much. It was just going to be too complicated. And I also took something that happened to one person and made it happen to someone else, because you don't, I guess the thing about poems is you can make them neater than real life. You can make them more
The
pointed.
way you want. Yeah.
Yeah, and what you want is a story, or I like stories, but at least something that's not that you're not waiting, saying, "Oh, wait, wait. So that must be the brother who was married before, and then that was the second person." And it's kind of honing it. Do you feel the same way, Alicia? I mean,
Yeah, I do. And I struggle with it though, because I think that it also comes down to the reason I'm writing. Is it because I'm looking to say something in a new way, or am I also trying to I guess, encapsulate something that is historical. I think about that with like my book because so much of it is a tribute to my father. So I want it to be both a record of him after his passing, but I also wanted it to reflect the neatness that you're talking about and the creative impulse, which isn't always about the directness or the accuracy of the moment. And particularly having my mom read it, who feels this is such a tribute to her husband of 50 years, that balance was really hard for me to figure out. So I appreciate you answering. I agree with you about the neatness and yeah, that's really well said.
Well, this is something I think about. I don't want to make this just a one-on-one decision, but poetry is kind of a way, or any kind of writing. It's exploitative in a way, or it can be. And this is, I mean, I think my daughter's here. I try to like never write about my children because I just feel like that would be. Is she still there? I don't know if she's still there, but I feel like it would be such a exploitation.
I'm here.
And I don't write about my husband I mean, I just.
Don't worry, you're recording.
Yeah. So,
What about my cat, though?
oh, that's right. I have written about your cat. Yeah. Um, but there's this, I don't know. I remember when Kelly, I don't know if you remember this, but when I was in Iowa City, I remember somebody said, never tell anybody anything because it's going to end up in a story. Just, and I do remember I ended up in someone's story, at one point. And you just feel like people are just like waiting to be picked off sometimes, or just, we're not, I mean, it's just, there's something, anyhow. So I'm mindful of that, because I want to be a nice person at the same time that I want to write what I want to write. And it's
Sounds
about
good.
the act,
You kind of have to do both, I think. I had been
Well, for
I've been
you, especially. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I've been working on a manuscript that had a big section about a family that I really care about a lot. And so when I finished it, I sent it to them and I said, I want you to read this and tell me because I will not publish it if you tell me it is hurtful to you. Um, because it was, of course, my perspective. I'm sure very different from their own perspective about their lives. So that's one way of dealing with it. Um, but I do think you can get at a deeper truth sometimes by altering
Hmm.
facts. Because there's the facts and then there's the truth. So, Alicia, I bet you got at something deeper um, by changing the facts.
Alternate facts.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Alternate facts.
We have another question, if you're ready to move on to another one. Anne Anderson asks, have you ever written any poem too sad to keep?
Oh God. My first chapbook was a very, very sad, a collection of very sad poems, but I don't think they were too sad to keep because they're a way of dealing with sadness, I think. It's therapeutic. So the answer is no. Um, so I found it helpful to be able to write really sad poems. So, so too sad to keep. No, no. I mean, and I think I've written some really sad poems too, but I found them helpful, and I hope other people found them helpful.
Great. Bart?
Ruth, do you find the older you get and the more experience you get at writing, the more you almost flow back to childhood
It's
for
funny.
lots of subjects and for so many different avenues to explore?
Yeah, I mean, this big chunk of this book is about childhood, and I hadn't written really very many poems at all about childhood until fairly recently, and then I just and I think it's because those years are so, when you think of how quickly elementary school goes by or high school or college, and you compare that to, between ages 61 and 65 or something, and that's like, it's like a minute. So I think those years are just so slow and packed and full, and I can remember them, whereas I can't remember last year. So really, I mean, so
Absolutely.
so there's just a lot of material there, and I had a very happy childhood, which is nice, so I can revisit all this, and it's fun for me. It's not like someone who had a terrible childhood and it's painful and you have to work through things. So
Funny thing about that memory, huh?
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Just wait, those of you out there who, But yes, I do find that. In fact, I have to I'm trying to resist the impulse to write about childhood because I feel like I did that, and now I want to do something different. So I'm trying to deliberately not write poems about childhood at this point.
Interesting. All right. Let's.
Write about overcoming adversity.
Oh yeah, yeah,
You've done a bit of that.
yeah. I have done that. Thank you.
Are there any more questions for Ruth?
Oh, and we're almost at an hour.
Yeah. Ruth, I have one more question if you would indulge.
Okay.
How does it feel to have a full-length collection now compared to having the chapbooks and the individual poems published?
Um, well, it's all nice. I have to say that, but this takes the cake. This is the best. Yeah, it's funny because I think Kelly and I both said, "Oh, who cares about full-length books? We're just going to have these little chapbooks." And we had our chapbooks, and then when we each got a book, it was like, "Ooh, you know, you know, how are you going to keep them down on the farm after they've had a full-length book?" I think so. It just feels different. It's much more substantial. I don't, I felt like I was always saying, "Well, I have this little book," and I mean, not to put that. I mean, chapbooks are great, but you have to kind of explain them to people because if people are not used to, this kind of poetry publishing world, it takes a little explanation. So I feel great. And thank you, thank you, thank you, Meadowlark. I mean, really,
Sure. It's an honor to publish this book.
thank you.
You fit with the Meadowlark family so beautifully.
It's a very nice family.
Thank you. And I guess a follow-up question to that is what's next for you? I mean, you're writing these GPS poems. What's your
Well,
next
I
goal?
finished those because I made myself stop at 11 because I thought, I can't just let this go by. So if you know anyone who wants to publish 11 poems, which is not an easy thing to find, I've actually, it's been kind of hard lately to, I've had a bit of a dry period, but I think it's just the season, preparing for Thanksgiving and holidays and all that. But today, actually, I got something done. So I don't know what's going to happen next.
Good answer.
What I'd like to have happen next is some things that aren't connected. I'd like to have just a whole bunch of, separate poems. But of course, you write, often I write about the things I'm thinking about, and the things I'm thinking about are things in my daily life. So, we spend a lot of my husband and I spend a lot of time with his um, um, quite elderly mother, and so am thinking a lot about, she's 90 and about that stage of life. So I do find myself writing a lot about that. So so I don't know what's next. Hopefully there is something next.
Well, it's nice that you can't stop writing.
Well, or won't let myself, I think is maybe
That's realistic.
yeah, yeah. And I do want to ask you, Lindsay, one more time, if you could make sure to save the chat because I want to see it, and I've been wanting to look at people, but and it just is so great to see all these people here. Although I'm still looking for the one person who I couldn't find. So let me just take one. Some names are big and some names are little, and I can't figure.
Mine isn't even there.
Sure. And a couple people have left here recently.
Okay. Oh, I see. I see. Oh, well, that's just fine. But I'm very grateful to all of you, especially some people who didn't even know I wrote poetry until recently, and especially people that I don't know at all that just came along because it was Meadowlark, which is, really lovely. So I'm very pleased.
Good. We want you to be pleased.
I am. I'm delighted.
We have this last comment. I love Beth's cat, and I think we can all sympathize with that. That's a great cat, Beth.
You know, a lot of the people from but not all there's a number of people who are in poems. I noticed the woman whose son wrote about his soprano voice, she's here, and the woman the woman who does my hair, whose cat was freaked out by the mannequin, is here,
I went
and
to prom with that boy. This is friends, but that's hilarious. I haven't thought about that in years.
That's awesome.
okay, so that's just lovely. So.
Well, I did put the link to Ruth's book in the chat again, so please, please buy yourself a copy, buy your loved ones a copy. It's the giving season. We do have a lot of holiday promos going on right now. So I think that you would be disappointed if you didn't get yourself a copy.
And my brother-in-law just said that I mentioned his ducks. So
oh, yes.
Me, I said that.
That was you. Okay, that was on.
Yes.
Okay.
That's awesome. This is such a wonderful party. Do we have any other parting words from anyone before I give a little conclusion statement?
Oh, could I just say one thing?
Of course.
Okay.
High school friend.
Hi, Ellie. Hi, Randy. Hi, Jan. Just, I didn't want you to think I forgot. So.
Hi, Albert.
Patty's here too, but you can't see her.
Oh.
Yeah, Patty's
Hey,
here.
Patty. How are you?
So good to see you.
Good to see you, Albert.
Hey, it's good to be seen and not viewed.
I see you.
I'm so proud of you, and you made me cry during this. I'm so proud of you.
Oh, Beth, thank you. I can hear you, but I can't see you, but I recognize your voice.
Oh,
Ruth, you might want to, there's 2 pages of people's
I'm going
faces.
to the next, yeah.
So you might not be seeing
There
them.
we are. Yep. Okay, just made
Okay,
it.
before we go, because you'll lose that.
Well, thank you
My
all.
book group friends are here too. So
Oh, good.
my aerobics friends and my neighbors, my next door neighbors.
Oh. I'm so glad you all came to support Ruth tonight. This is so, so, so special. It's a huge accomplishment to have a whole book published, to have anything published, but man, I just can't say enough how proud we are to have these poems in our collection and how wonderful it's been to work with Ruth this whole time. Utterly delightful. And I just love this whole process. And it's really honestly quite sad that it doesn't quite end here, but this is the grand finale. We'll have some things after this, but it's just been wonderful to work with you, Ruth.
Thank you. I mean, it's been they let me do anything I wanted.
That's right. That's right. This is your book. Do what you want. Also, it being the 10th anniversary of Meadowlark Press, we are having a little party on the 15th. So if you are in Kansas or are willing to travel on December 15th, we are having a 10th anniversary party in Emporia, and I will be posting on our website and social media pages about that. So would love to have you there. I do also plan on recording portions of it, or at least taking pictures to share with you all, so we can keep celebrating Ruth and all of the books from this year and the Birdy Poetry Prize and everything Meadowlark has accomplished in this decade. All right. I hope you all have a beautiful night. Ruth, I'll let you have the final word, but I just wanted to say thank you all so much for being here.
Oh, well, thank you. And I'm just very grateful to Meadowlark. Thank you to all of you who are very important to in my life. Thank you to the people I don't know who wanted to spend an hour of their evening doing this. And thank you to old and dear friends and people I know in many ways. This is just, it's heartwarming. So look at Randy. Okay. Well, I guess I'll say good night and hope to see you all in person. So I guess Lindsay, you'll have to close it because I just can't bring myself to. So
very good. Thank you all. Appreciate you all. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
Lots
Bye-bye.
of love to
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Happy
So
holidays.
proud.
Stay
Happy
safe,
holidays.
folks.
Thank you.
Bye.